Hello everybody and welcome to Decoding the WSL, the podcast dedicated to the stats and facts in the WSL. Today we're having a look ahead to game week 7. There's some big matches at the bottom of the table and also for the Champions League spot, so lots to talk about, and I'm going to be giving you all the stats and all the numbers you need ahead of this weekend's games. I'm your host, Stattorino. Yes, hello listener. You join me on Wednesday the 6th of November as we're going to have a look ahead to the 6 games coming up this weekend. 2 games on Friday, followed by 4 on Sunday. There are, as I mentioned, big games at both ends of the table because Arsenal are hosting Brighton in one of the Friday kickoffs and Manchester United are hosting Villa on Sunday. So 2 teams that will be vying for that 3rd Champions League spot in the 2 home teams. There's also big matches at the bottom of the table, with Palace hosting Everton and West Ham against Leicester, in an area of the table where the teams are going to be, I think, quite close at the end of the season. These are going to be real 6-pointers to keep an eye on. There's also Man City Spurs, which is also always a good time, and Liverpool Chelsea, which will be a real tussle. Remember the last game they played, it was 4-3. So plenty for us to get into tonight, plenty for us to have a look ahead to. I'm going to be giving you all the numbers and all the stats, as I've mentioned. And we're going to start off at the Emirates with Arsenal-Brighton. Friday, 7 p.m. at the Emirates and also live on YouTube. It's going to be Nikita Paris heading back to the club that she played at back in 2021. It's Arsenal hosting Brighton. 2 teams that I think anyone at the start of the season would have expected to be not necessarily at different ends of the table, but definitely Arsenal would have been ahead of Brighton. But no, 6 matches in, Arsenal are in 5th and Brighton are in the Champions League spots in 3rd. Michelle Aubameyang is, would be coming up against her former club, her parent club I should say, but will be unavailable due to sort of loan rules within the league. In terms of how these 2 teams face up against each other, it's very much all in Arsenal's direction. They've actually won all 12 WSL meetings between the 2 sides with an aggregate score of 44-2. So Arsenal scoring sort of 3 or 4 a game on average. Brighton have scored 2 in 12 games. It is definitely a matchup that is in Arsenal's favour. In fact, the last 5 that obviously have all been Arsenal wins have been 3-0, 4-0, 4-0, 3-0 and 5-0. So a combined score of, 19-0 in just 5 games. Definitely in Arsenal's favour. But Brighton are under new management now and have got, quite a good bit of recruitment done over the summer. So they're looking strong and they may actually be able to sort of buck that trend. We'll have to wait and see. Of the 12 meetings in the WSL, 11 of them have had 3 or more goals in them. The only one that didn't was Arsenal's 2-0 win at home back in April 2021. Arsenal aren't having the best time of it in the WSL at home at the moment. They are a team that lost last time out when they hosted Chelsea at the Emirates. They lost 2-1. That ended a run of 12 unbeaten at home in the league for Arsenal. They've had 2 draws and a loss at home, so they're yet to win at home this season, which is definitely not the kind of form they're going to be wanting if they're going to be pushing for that 3rd Champions League spot behind Man City and Chelsea, fighting against Man United and potentially even Brighton. Brighton are yet to be 0-0 at half-time in any match this season. Interestingly, 3 of the 6 games they've played have been 1-0, including both away games they've played, which was the loss to Man City and the win against Crystal Palace. Brighton have won 4 of their last 5 in all competitions, so they're looking strong at the moment, but I think in this game, Arsenal, you would hope, or you would expect, I say you would hope, you're not all Arsenal fans listening to it like me, but you would expect that Arsenal should be the better team within this. I think they will have enough to go past Brighton. I think under Rene, they're looking a lot better than they did under Jonas. So I think Arsenal are going to have enough to not just score a couple of goals, but I think also to keep Brighton quiet. So I'm going to predict this is going to finish 2-0. Now, the other game that is going to be on Friday night is at the Etihad. It is Man City hosting Spurs. This one kicks off at 7:30. If you can't make it to the Etihad, it will be live on Sky Sports. There are a couple of players against their former clubs here. Lana Kennedy, once a Spurs player, and obviously Hayley Raso used to be at Man City, but is now down in London after a brief spell at Real Madrid. Becky Spencer has hit the news a little bit this week. She signed a new contract until 2026 at Spurs. I think this is a goalkeeper that's probably, I don't know what the opposite of a purple patch is. but that's what she's in. She's definitely out of form at the moment, but she is a very good goalkeeper. I think Spurs may not have extended this contract, especially by 2 years, if they had another goalkeeper lined up at the moment. We know that Spurs have got problems with their goalkeeping sort of situation. They've brought in one on loan from West Ham, but she's not getting a look in, despite the fact that Becky Spencer's been in pretty poor form. They definitely need a bit more depth there, and they've given Becky Spencer a bit of a longer contract, I guess, just to A, see if her form picks up, but B, if not, give them time to recruit the right person to take over from her. In terms of how these teams are getting on so far this season, Man City are obviously topping the league, up in first, while Spurs are kind of surprisingly down in seventh. I think seventh is probably about where I think they'd finish this season, but I've been a bit surprised at how sort of topsy-turvy they are. In some matches they look brilliant, and in some matches not so much. I think this is a game where they're going to try and take the game to Man City, but we'll have to see how it goes, because City are in good form against Spurs. They've won the last 5 against them in the WSL. City have also won 10 of their last 11 home games in the WSL, whereas Spurs have not won in their last 5 away league games. Neither City or Spurs have gone in at halftime 0-0 in the WSL this season, so expect at least one goal before halftime. 13 of the last 14 games for Man City have had at least 3 goals in them. The only one that didn't was the 1-0 win against, well, a very much improved Brighton at the start of this season. For Spurs, they are 8 games in a row having 3 or more goals, so both teams getting a lot of goals in their games recently. Bunny Shaw is obviously going to be out there for Man City. You would expect she is now the outright top scorer in the league with, well, only 4, which by her standards isn't a lot, considering we're 6 games in. But I think this game is going to be one that is going to have a lot of chances for both teams. I think Man City especially are going to be quite dominant in this game. I think we can look back at when Spurs played Chelsea recently and see that even though Chelsea obviously were a better team than Spurs, similar to what I think Man City are going to be on Friday, Spurs are a team that will still try and take the game to them. You know, I know they scored a couple of relatively fluky goals against Chelsea, but they're still a team that had a decent amount of chances, even though they concede probably even more. But they try and play the right way. They try and go with, the to dare is to do, as the Spurs motto is. So I think they will try and attack, but I think City will just be that bit better. There's going to be chances for both teams. Man City, realistically, are probably going to be the more clinical. So I'm going to go for a 2-1 Man City win. That is the 2 games on Friday covered off with my predictions for both as well. After this quick break, we're going to cover the 4 matches that are on Sunday. Hello listener and welcome back to Decoding the WSL. We have just covered off Friday's games and now we've got the 4 games on Sunday to talk about. We're going to start off with the first one of the day. It's 12:30 at the St Helens Stadium, otherwise known as the Totally Wicked Stadium. It's going to be live on BBC Two and it is Liverpool against Chelsea. We've got 3 Chelsea players that would be back at their former club if they were all fit. Obviously Niamh Charles and Sophie Ingle are likely to both be out with injury, but Lucy Bronze will probably be playing back at the team that she used to play in quite many moons ago, I think they say. It is 6th versus 2nd in the league. Chelsea are flying up there, have won every game. Not bad to be 2nd in the league, considering that you've played a game less than everyone else. But Liverpool are a little bit of a bogey team for Chelsea. If you remember the last time out, Liverpool won 4-3 at home against Chelsea, almost ruining it for Emma Hayes in that sort of period where they just seem to be getting knocked out of every competition going. But in fact, their 2 meetings last season in the league were quite goal-fest. The other one was 5-1 to Chelsea, including a Lauren James hat-trick. So 13 goals in just 2 league matches last season between them. I wonder if we can expect some more goals this Sunday. Well, I think one team will definitely be scoring goals because Liverpool are yet to keep a clean sheet in the WSL this season. We know Chelsea are sort of very good goal scorers in the competition as well, so definitely expect some of that. You have to go back to March 2019 before you find a clean sheet in a WSL match between these 2 teams, for either team. So they're used to scoring against each other. Liverpool have only lost 1 of their last 10 matches in the WSL, which was a 2-1 loss against City. Chelsea, on the other hand, are definitely a team that are just thrashing the goals in wherever they come from. They've scored the most goals in the league this season with 20. They are 8 ahead of anyone else. Spurs and City are both on 12, which again is even more impressive considering they've only played 5 games compared to 6 for most teams. They're also, interestingly, the only team that have scored more than 1 goal from corners this season, showing they do have quite a good attacking threat, sort of from set pieces. Chelsea have, unsurprisingly, got the most XG in the WSL this season, but not as much as you'd expect considering they've scored 20 goals. They've only got 13.6 XG, so they've overachieved that by 6.4, which is pretty good. They're about 50% over their XG. Second place, to give a bit of context, is Man City on 13.2, so City are underachieving their XG, while Chelsea are sort of way above it. You'd expect them to maybe have scored 1 more goal than City, given the XG, but the fact they've overachieved it by quite so much shows how clinical this Chelsea team are. In terms of how I think this game's going to go, I think Chelsea are going to be the better team. They're in such good form under Sonia Bonpastor, and I think Liverpool are going to put up a fight. It's not going to be a thrashing. We're not going to see the sort of score that Chelsea got against the Crystal Palace or against Everton last time out. I think Liverpool are going to be much better defensively than those teams, but I do think Chelsea are going to sort of buck that trend that we see between the two sides, and I think Chelsea might keep a clean sheet in this game, so I'm going to go for a Chelsea 2, Liverpool 0. There is only one 2 p.m. game on Sunday, which is Crystal Palace against Everton. This is at the VBS Community Stadium, otherwise known as the Sutton United Stadium, and will be live on YouTube. We've got Katrine Verger against her former club. She spent the last season and a half at Everton, and both sides are sort of languishing a bit lower than they'd like to be. I think Crystal Palace you would expect to be kind of low down the table, considering they've only just come up, but Everton are definitely doing a lot worse than they would have expected to this season. They are 9th and 12th, respectively. Palace have obviously got a win on the board and a draw with 4 losses, while Everton have got two draws and 4 losses. This is, as far as I can find for any research I've done, the first time these two sides have actually ever faced each other. How about that, listener? Very new territory we're into. Palace have not had a good start to the season at home. They've lost all 3 of their home games with an aggregate score of 11-0, so they're conceding a lot as well as not scoring at all. Everton, however, are very much the same in their away games this season. They have had a loss, a draw, and then another loss with a 5-0 aggregate scoreline, so they haven't scored away from home, and they haven't actually had, as I mentioned before, they haven't actually had a player score in the WSL this season because their only goal came at home against West Ham when Melissa Lawley's cross was deflected in by the West Ham defender. So 6 games in, that's kind of impressive. I don't really know how else to describe it, that an Everton player has still not scored a goal this season, despite the fact that they've accumulated enough XG to at least score 2 or 3 goals, if not a little bit more. Normally, you might hear the phrase something along the lines of the immovable object and the unstoppable force, but I think for this, it's a case of both teams just struggling to score, so whatever the opposite of that analogy is what it is here. Something I did want to pick up on, though, in the stats is one about Palace and their shots, because Palace have had the highest XG per shot in the WSL this season with 0.21, which shows that they get quite high quality chances, so although they don't generate loads of them, they're not really shooting from distance that much, they're actually creating some really good chances. In really good positions, even if they're not necessarily scoring loads. They've only scored 3 goals so far this season, and obviously none of those have been at home. How do I think this game's going to go? Well, it's quite difficult. It'd be really easy just to predict a 0-0 because both teams can't really score. I think Palace are going to be the team that have more of the ball, for sure. I think Everton are going to be pressing them. I think they're going to be, making a concerted effort to make it difficult for Palace, but we do know that they are quite a good attacking team. Think of how many goals they managed to score in the Championship last season. Will Everton actually score? I don't think so. I don't think they'll be clinical enough with the few chances they get. And this could be a big turning point for them. I think if they come away from this match getting a goal or 2, they can take that confidence going forward, especially the players that score it can take some confidence because there's not a lot of that at the moment. Whereas if they come away without scoring, they've now played against the least experienced side in the league. I know they've got a lot of experienced players, but they need to take time to gel, etc. They've played against the likes of West Ham and Leicester that are low down the table as well, and still haven't managed to score, never mind anything else, never mind get a win. It's going to be quite damning on their confidence going forward. And I think, yeah, like I say, this can really be a turning point, because a goal is going to do wonders. And if they come away again without scoring, that's going to do wonders for them. Well, whatever the opposite of wonders are in the other direction. I think Everton are going to be shooting from distance quite a lot, because that's something they tend to do. And Palace are going to be having a lot of the ball, trying to create chances, but really good chances. So they're going to be kind of few and far between, because it's easier said than done. I said at the start of this little prediction bit that it would be really easy to predict 0-0. And to be honest, that's why I'm going to do it. I'm going to go for 0-0 because I don't think either of these teams are going to manage to score in this game. Right, the penultimate game of the weekend is 3 o'clock on Sunday. This one is also live on YouTube. It is West Ham hosting Leicester. It is 11th versus 8th. It is the other match down at the bottom of the table this season. These teams met in pre-season. It was 5-2 to Leicester. Leicester were actually 5-0 up at one point. I think it was both in injury time in the second half. There were 2 Vivasei goals to sort of cling back some sort of dignity for West Ham in this game, but it really was Leicester thrashing them. Although Leicester had a very different side then, because they had people like Nomi Mouchon, they had people like Jutta Rantala, who are obviously out injured at the moment. Both WSL matches between these two teams last season finished 1-1, so they've obviously been 2 very well-matched sides. West Ham haven't changed that much in their both personnel and obviously coaching as well. They've kept Rianne Skinner. Leicester, however, have changed quite a lot. They've brought in quite a few players, which have been very good signings, and they also have got a new coach. West Ham are 15 games winless in the WSL, including 6 games winless at home in the league. Not good reading for them, and definitely something they need to turn around if they want to get off, well, pretty much the bottom of the table, because the only reason they're not at the bottom of the table at the moment is because their goal difference is only 3 better than Everton. So they're definitely a team that could get stuck down there if they don't manage to get, a couple of points over the next few games, especially if Everton do. Leicester, however, aren't in the best run of form either. They are 8 games away in the WSL without a win. So both teams struggling for wins and some aspects struggling for form. Leicester have been very good defensively recently. They've not really conceded that many goals, but they've also not scored many. I think in this game, it's going to be quite a close game. I think there's not going to be one team that dominates more than the other. If we look at the possession after, I'd guess it would be somewhere between 45 to 55% per team. But I think Leicester's defence might be something that wins the game for them. I think they've got 2 of the best keepers in the league. It doesn't matter too much which one plays. They're both going to be very good. They've got a really good defence as well. Sari Keys and Sophie Howard seem to be linking up very well and have both got a really good record recently, both at club and international level. So I think they've got enough to keep West Ham out, and I think they've probably got enough to get a goal as well. So I'm going to go for a 1-0 Leicester win. And the final game of the week is Man United hosting Aston Villa at Leigh Sports Village. This one is going to be live on Sky Sports at 6:45 on Sunday. There's a couple of players back at their old club. Adriana Leon obviously spent a little bit of time at Manchester United, and Kirsty Hansen back to Manchester United, the team that she loves. She did a really good interview with Sophie Howard on the bold tackle, and Oliver Howard, her brother. If you haven't listened to that, or I think you can watch it on YouTube as well, I'd recommend it, because it's really good to get an insight into, you get an insight into Sophie Howard and the background of her life around football all the time, but it's good to get an insight into some of the other players, and you can really see the difference in mentality between players as well. They're both really good players, but they think in very different ways. It's quite interesting. Would definitely recommend it. These two teams have got quite contrasting form this season. Man United are doing pretty well in 4th, considering that they've played a game fewer than most of the other teams. They are unbeaten in the WSL as well this season, whereas Aston Villa, on the other hand, have yet to win in the WSL, so they are languishing down in 10th. They are at risk of getting drawn into, they probably are actually already getting drawn into a relegation scrap. They are only above the relegation spot on goal difference, albeit 6 goals above, because although they're conceding a lot, they are scoring enough to keep them above that range. it's not going too well at the moment, but I do think, as I mentioned before, Aston Villa have a really good set of players, and I think they are in a bit of bad form at the moment and will revert to the mean and gel a bit more and get better, and they will start moving up the table. Probably not into, the top half necessarily, but I definitely can see them finishing in a sort of comfortable 8th position sort of thing, not being threatened by relegation as the season goes on. These teams have faced each other 11 times before. Villa have only won once, and that was on penalties back in 2022 in the Conti Cup group stage. So never in a league game, and obviously the game that they did win wasn't in normal time. Man United are, I think, a team that's going to be back to playing a bit better. They didn't have a good run last time out against Arsenal. If you watch the highlights or if you listen to any Manchester United fans talking about it, or even any Arsenal fans, to be honest, you'll hear that Man United did not play well and they were kind of lucky to get away with a point. Mark Skinner referenced that after the game as well. But I think Man United will be back to playing a bit better now. And to be honest, Villa aren't playing well enough to get anything, especially away at a team like Man United. So I don't think Villa are going to score in this game. I think Man United are a team that's probably got the best sort of defence and keeper combination in the league at this moment. Chelsea are obviously very good as well. They are up there as a Man City, but Man United are just looking really good. Fallon Joyce is looking like a player, to be honest, I think better than Marriott's was last season. So I could see a Manchester United clean sheet here, and I think they'll at least get a couple of goals. So I'm going to go for 2-0 Man United. Well, listener, that is all 6 games covered off. It is a bit quicker this week just because, to be honest, I haven't had enough time to do a longer one, but I hope that's been good enough for you nevertheless. As always, thank you for tuning in to Decoding the WSL. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And it really helps if you can give a 5-star review as well, because it does go a long way in helping others find the show, especially at the moment, because we're only, about 3 months into the podcast and still trying to grow it and grow the conversation. You can always stay up to date by following us on Instagram at Decoding the WSL, and of course join the discussion on Reddit as well, r/Decoding the WSL. Of course, for even more stats and insights, you can follow me at Stattorino on X, Instagram and Threads. I do very occasionally post on TikTok as well, but they are the main 3. And if you want to get in touch, just drop me a message on social media, or you can always send an email to decodingthewslpod@gmail.com. Because I always love to hear your thoughts, I love to hear any questions you have, and I love to hear any ideas for pods that you've got as well. I've had a couple of ideas in recently, as I mentioned on the last show, or, if there are any players you want me to try and get on, to try and interview, that sort of thing, do let me know and I'll see what I can do. But yeah, thank you again for listening, and I'll speak to you at the next one.